Okay. Family 4 is stall turns. Still lines. Still radiuses in and out. Radiuses in and out do not have to match. Okay. But we're still judging the lines. Stall turns can also have those 45s. So we're going to throw in some extra radiuses and some extra lines to judge for the judges. 45 lines can have elements on them depending on the class.
Now on the 45 line, the radiuses on the entry and exit on the 45 line should be the same, right? No?
Look at your, did we hand you a quick reference?
I don't have
Okay.
it. I always thought,
Drawn as corner, drawn as corner angles.
Kind of confusing.
We know by looking at the arresti, they're drawn as those.
45 line on family 3 does, but when you come right over here to like 45 hammer that we do,
oh,
it doesn't.
Okay. Drawn on the arresti is a corner angle, so that's the real thing as you're looking at the arresti. Those quick references are in the judging books, but we know it's drawn as the corner angles. So we know by default they don't have to match, and we also know it's not family 3, and it's not those diamond, square loop, octagon loop 7. So we immediately know those radiuses don't have to match just by looking at the arresti and knowing it's family 4, it's not family 3 or those loops in family 7. Okay, so it's real easy for the judge to tell very quickly.
Does the 45 line length on the entry to that, the 45 hammer, that line length, does that have to be half the total vertical length? That line length doesn't matter.
Makes no difference. Yep.
It has to be a good line.
Just needs to be 45, wind corrected 45.
They're only judging 45.
Wind corrected 45, yep. Can be as short or as long as you like. And if you wait too long on the down line, it might be significantly short before the ground gets you. So the only thing we're adding for family 4 is the criteria for the stall turn at the top, right? Because everything else is just lines and radiuses and centering of the elements. Okay? So stall turn at the top is the only part that's different about all of our aerobatic basics. Okay? Stall turns, we don't typically talk about this, but in the book, we've got a wind corrected line on the up. So I just want to point out to the pilots, hopefully save you some points. The pivot at the top needs to be in the vertical plane. So we're going to have some wind this weekend, coming from the south-southwest or even the south. So we'll have some pitch. If you're doing it over here, we'll have some pitch. Okay? If you rotate at that pitch, that's a deduction for that pitch at the top. Okay? What's required is for you to take the plane to vertical and rotate in that vertical plane. Okay? Not.
and then the drift isn't a deduction.
Okay, so we'll get into some other stuff. So is everybody clear on that, the expectation?
Say that again.
Yeah, so for the stall turn, because you couldn't see that well, we're wind corrected on the way up. Okay, so like the wind's going to be coming from south-southwest. We're definitely wind corrected on the way up. We have to be so that our CG is going on a straight up line. But the criteria for the stall turn is at the top, we rotate in the vertical plane. So before you rotate, we've got to get it to straight up and down and then rotate in that vertical plane. And then guess what we're going to do? We're going to immediately get that wind correction back in for the wind corrected down line. Okay, but the pivot at the top has got to be in the vertical plane. It's a deduction if it's not. Okay, so if the nose is pitched down or up, take your pick, depending on the wind, whatever half point per 5 degrees, when it's rotating, is a deduction. Okay.
And your track down won't match the track up because you'll be displaced.
Yeah, so that's the other. There are some stall maneuvers where we stop judging that flight path, the flight path of the CG, and this is one of the stall conditions. So when you as a judge have determined that this airplane is now no longer kind of in control of where it's going kind of deal, it's in this stalled condition, we don't deduct for the drift. Okay, the wind's going to be blowing us out this weekend. So they've got their wind correction in. They probably even have a little bit of yaw because it's come from the south-southwest. Okay, when we've determined that it's now it's getting pushed by the wind, it's in a stalled condition and it's getting shoved sideways, there's no deduction for that. They're going to pivot. I can almost guarantee everybody's going to pivot with the wind this weekend. Okay, and we're going to get them back down. Now it's an opposite wind correction on the down line. Once we've determined that they're back up to flying airspeed, we're now going to start judging the CG again. We expect them to be on a perfect downline, wind corrected downline for that CG of the aircraft. Okay, but we give them that whole floating around, wind blowing you around while you're stalled. Okay. Deductions for the pivot. Untrained judges, if the airplane kind of goes over like this, untrained judge is going to zero you for that. Because I've heard that a flyover is a 0. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So we give you a freebie. The perfect maneuver is the airplane pivoting on the CG. Okay, I'm doing that for the camera. Perfect stall turn is its pivots on the CG. Ivan Christensen is the only guy on the planet that I've ever seen be able to do that. Literally, the only guy on the planet I've ever seen able to do that. It's amazing when you see it. Totally crazy. But we give you the wingtip. Okay, so if you see the airplane rotate at the wingtip, there's no deduction for the displacement laterally. Okay, everything after that, okay, so pivot at the wingtip's cool, okay, but if they pivot from there to there, okay, this is where they were supposed to be, and they've gone a half a wingspan, 1 point per each half wingspan from that point where they're supposed to be. So you watch this wingtip, and then watch how far it goes over. Okay, half a wingspan, 1 point. You see a whole airplane in between those 2 points, 2 points. Okay, it doesn't get to a 0 until you've got 4 wingspans. Okay, because that's 8 points. No, 4 wingspans is 8 points of lateral deduction. Okay, because it's a half point for each wingspan. So 4 wingspans is 8 point deduction for the amount they flow over. So I don't know however far 4 wingspans is.
So visually, you're seeing.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge, huge, huge. Yeah. So I mean, for the person to be here and still flying, because we're not talking about wind drift, you know, for them to actually do 4 wingspans, okay, that's an actual 0 for what is called a flyover in IMAC. And I gotta tell you, in 15 years, I have never seen one. It just doesn't happen.
Just real quick, anybody have an issue with salt and can't have salt type seasoning on their burger?
Looks good. All right.
Okay.
Chef's getting started. All right. Top of the stall turn, we're still going to judge the wings. So if you get torquing like this, pretty common, get a little bit of wing torque because you're kind of in that stall condition. Well, too bad. We still expect you to keep your wings in the right spot. So the engine starts to take over and the plane starts to rotate. We're going to deduct for that. Whoever gets the least of that gets the better score.
Okay, what about the side wind?
Okay.
When you're flying up like this?
Wing corrected, I don't care.
Yeah, but I mean, when you get to the top, you still gotta bang it straight?
Nope, nope, absolutely not. We're just talking about pitch. It has to pivot in the vertical plane. So that was the question is, do we have to get it straight before we pivot? No, we're just talking about it has to pivot in the vertical plane. Okay, so regardless of, like, we're gonna have wing correction like this weekend, we're still pivoting in the vertical plane, and it's not gonna be 180 degrees of pivot because we're gonna pivot from here to here. Okay, makes sense? We're gonna pivot from here to here with the wind coming this direction. Okay, so it's just that vertical plane, and it actually says that. It has to pivot in the vertical plane, okay? All right, so we're gonna deduct for that, and then,
Okay, on the stall, they start to pivot, and as they're halfway around, they start to come down, and then finish it. Is that
okay,
0 because they didn't pivot before they started to lose altitude?
And then that's a tail slide.
Tail slide's a different maneuver.
I heard 2 things. One, I heard they're already turning, okay? So they're pivoting, and the plane stalls and falls like this.
Yeah.
No issue. Okay, so one of the stall turn zeros, Bill Evans mentioned, is you go up, and it actually just starts to come backwards like this. Okay, that's a 0 because you've flown the wrong maneuver, is why.
If it starts to drop on your wing coming down, it's okay.
Yeah, you've already started your pivot,
Yes.
and just because of the lack of airspeed, it just falls over like that. Nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with that. No, absolutely nothing wrong with that because you are stalling and you are turning. Okay, the fact that it's dropping while you're turning.
All of a sudden, she started coming down.
Yep, absolutely. No issues there at all. Okay, so that was one of the zeros. If you fly a tail slide, as soon as you start doing a tail slide, it's a 0 because it's the wrong arrestee maneuver, and that's why it's a 0. Because there is a tail slide in our arrestee catalog, so you fly the wrong maneuver, which is always a 0 if you fly the wrong maneuver. Okay. The last thing specific to the stall turns is that little kind of waggle. Okay. All right. Some pilots do, some pilots don't. The ones that don't get the deductions. Okay. The really odd thing about this deduction is it's not based on the CG of the aircraft. Okay, because normally we're judging the CG. Because normally you'd say, okay, I came over, and while it's coming straight, the CG's coming straight down. My airplane's doing this business. Well, my CG's coming straight down.
It comes back, then that's a
Okay.
deduction.
Yeah. So that's the weird thing is it typically goes past and then comes back. Okay, that's the typical. No, it's not. It's a half point per 5 degrees, and that's the weird thing about this deduction, because it's not based on where the CG of the plane's going. It's not like you're flying over that direction and then flying back. It's a weird thing because we're actually judging the attitude in that case. So as a pilot, you really want to try to kind of go graceful into that last part of that, because we give you time to get back to that downline and get your new wind corrected downline established. If you go over real hard, that's where you're going to get that flopping thing going on. And so that literally is based on where's the nose pointing, not the CG. So points over at 15 degrees, half point per 5 degrees for that waggle. Okay, so I'm not a big fan of it myself because I want to be judging the CG of the plane. I mean, on a parallel line, on 45 line, I can waggle back and forth all I want as long as the CG's going parallel straight 45 up. But doesn't matter. That's the rules.
That's a zero.
That's the flat spin. Doing some freestyle. Doing freestyle, man. Yeah. So that's a rule I don't agree with, but it is the rule. So it is what it is. Try as a pilot to go a little more graceful over the top. And so just a flying tip, just kind of let out of the rudder a little bit, and then as kind of apply it back in so it comes back in smooth to the downline. We're going to give you that time to get back on that established downline before we start judging the track again. Okay, get rid of that deduction. Key thing is pilots, if you know the deductions, you can practice to remove them. That's how you get better, okay? And if you know somebody that knows the criteria, have them tell you what you're doing wrong, okay? It doesn't matter. Spencer Norcross is out here flying shallow 45s. Spencer, don't do that. Save you some points, okay?